UXPA MN, we're talking about a personal introduction to accessibility, and we are so glad that you could join us. And if you aren't here in person, then maybe you're watching this recorded. We record these now. We send out a link after the event to everyone registered, and we're also sharing on YouTube. So maybe we're seeing you there. We're finding more and more ways to reach out to our members and folks who are interested in this stuff. So however you're joining us, we are glad to have you. Welcome. I'm Andy Kruger. I'm your president for this year, 2022. And, you know, we were thinking with these virtual events, one thing that we're really missing is the chance to see us. You see me every month. You're probably sick of me already and ready to move on to next year. And you see Jason most months. He's here. Jalen, you see a lot of months. They're helping us bring in these excellent speakers and panelists and get things going. And sometimes you see Renee, but not enough. Renee Otto is our vice president, and she is here to talk about our upcoming events. So I'm going to hand it over to her to talk about what we got coming up soon.
Thanks, Andy. And thanks all of you for joining us here this evening or day or whenever you're fortunate enough to watch this recording. As you can see, we have an overview of events. They are typically on the second Thursday of every month. And obviously you're here tonight for the personal introduction into accessibility. We're really excited for all of our guests to share with us their knowledge on that topic. Next month, we're going to be discussing tech industry ethics with Niatu Bensi-Enchil. He was amazing at World Usability Day. He was one of our panelists there, and we greatly enjoyed his perspective on also accessibility and inclusivity. So it'll be a great honor to have him back. Should be really interesting. In June, we're going to focus on healthcare. And in July, we will have our summer social. This is one of our in-person events where we all get really excited to actually see each other in person. So that's going to be a lot of fun. August will be How to Open the Door with Savannah Kyle. This will be a fireside chat for UX leaders to figure out how to really bring in a more diverse generation with the next steps there. September and October are yet to be determined, and we have World Usability Day, that's November 11th, and then we don't tend to meet in December. But if any of you have ideas and would like to share them with us, we would welcome them for any upcoming events. And so if you would like to bring a topic to mind or are interested in presenting, please do. Reach out to our program director, Jason, or our associate program director, Jalen. They would be happy to discuss your ideas with you and find out what you have in mind. Their handles are there on Slack and email, so don't be shy and reach out. Back to you, Andy.
Thanks, Renee. So that is a good reminder too. If you want to become a UXPA member, get in that members only Slack. Please join up with us. Your membership's valid for 12 months, starting from when you join or renew. And we've got reduced rates for students. So if you're learning or just interested in becoming a member, or becoming a UX practitioner, or just learning more about what we're doing over here, you can join up as a student at that reduced rate and be a member for a year. So you also are going to get discounted or free event admission for the stuff that we charge for. In particular, that summer social, that's for members only, and World Usability Day, you can get a discount. And there's all these other cool benefits as well. So you'll be recognized as a member of UXPA Minnesota, which is a chapter of and a huge international organization. If you weren't aware, there's chapters all over the world, and UXPA is very well recognized as a great professional organization. So please join us. We would love to have you. And we want to say thanks before we get into the talk to all of our sponsors. Again, we got some great sponsors this year, and their support helps us pay the bills and keep bringing this content to you. So thank you to Optum, to Boston Scientific, Foundry and Beacon Hill at our gold level of sponsorship, really helping us with nice donations, and then to Securian Financial at the silver level. And you know, this slide looks pretty full, but we can fit some more in there. So if you're interested in sponsoring, give us a call and we can talk to you about the benefits of sponsoring. One of them is that you can come to these events and you can make an announcement. So if you're hiring, if you're just interested in sharing something cool that your company's doing or whatever, that is open to you. And we've got other benefits as well. So you can give me a call if you want to talk about that. Just email our regular mailbox. And that's it for the preamble. So now let's get to the main event. I want to introduce you to tonight's panelists. You can probably see them there in their little screens, but they're going to take over here in a minute and talk to us about what they're here to talk to us. I'm really excited to hear this story. So we have, in no particular order, Lori Neff, the Senior Digital Accessibility Analyst at HealthPartners. And then from Optum, we have Tammy Campoverde, Principal Accessibility Engineer, and Thomas VanValkenburg, also Principal Accessibility Engineer. So welcome them, UXPA MN, April event. These are our folks. I'm going to turn it over to them, and we'll look forward to taking part in this conversation. Take it away.
Thank you so much. All right, so let's see, a few months ago, time has no meaning. It was really cool because Jason reached out and said, hey, do you want to present at UXPA Minnesota? And I said, yes. And I did another talk in February, I don't know, about for design behaviors and other stuff. And so then I said, hey, buddies, Thomas, Tammy, can you come in and join me here? And they were totally game. And so I'm so excited. And as we were planning for this and discussing with Jason, what do we want to talk about? We ended up, all three of us came from a background of UX, et cetera. And we'll get into that, but we wanted to, cover a few things. But the biggest thing is that this is a very personal journey for all of us. And we all have very personal stories. And we wanted to make that personal for all of you as well. There's so much cool things that are involved in accessibility and inclusive design. And so that's how this kind of came about. And that's our approach is, we wanted to make this fun. We didn't want to make this, accessibility. Here's this, another barrier to, your fun design. This is cool. There's so much good stuff here. And so all of us are going to share and field questions. If you have questions, put them in the chat for now. And if it's something really, really pertinent, I think that they're going to let us know. So we can address it as we go. But honestly, any question that you feel like, please ask, because this is for you, and we want you to get as much as you can out of this talk. So, Thomas, you want to add anything before we get started?
I love that when you started, your answer to Jason was yes, and it's great for improv, and it's great for collaborating. Whether you're working with designers or accessibility folks or development team, that's a good attitude. So I like the answer, yes, and yeah, I think we're just gonna, for starters, tell our story, like how each of us got started with accessibility, and then maybe talk about accessibility a little bit. Not maybe, but we will, like some little introductory stuff, and then I don't know, just improv for a while. Take questions, see where it goes.
Yes, and.
Yes, and.
Tammy, do you have anything you want to add before we get started?
I'm tempted to say yes, and, but I don't really have anything. So I will let Thomas start with his story.
Yes, stories.
Okay, cool. Actually, the one other thing I wanted to say is I love on the upcoming events slide, and maybe because I live in an accessibility world, I see accessibility everywhere. But those upcoming topics, talking about healthcare, talking about, what was the other thing? I couldn't help but think, oh, that directly relates to accessibility. But, kind of everything relates to accessibility.
Ethics,
yeah,
and then I think there was some about
yeah.
diversity, like a diverse audience. So yeah, all of that, it's all coming together.
That's awesome. Yeah, and we have some friends here too, I see, in the participants list, so cool. All right.
Hi, friends.
So I think, is that Should we start?
Yeah. Let's get started.
So when I was a kid, just kidding, not gonna. I will, just to tell a little tiny bit. When I was a kid, I thought I want to be a race car driver, but that was not realistic. And then I settled on I'm going to be a pilot, but actually I'm blind in one eye. And one of my older brothers, who is part mean and part just honest, was like, "You can't. They won't let you fly a plane." And when I learned how to drive a car, I kind of like, because I have less depth perception than people with binocular vision, I knew when to stop when the stop signs started getting bigger, faster. So some people in my early years of driving were like, like, why do you do that? But I learned how to get through it. So then I thought, well, I can be a storyteller. I was too shy to like actually tell stories, but I thought I would write, or I loved art. Maybe I would do like cartoons or animation or whatever. So I went to college for graphic design. And actually I loved 3D animation and 3D modeling. So at St. Cloud State, I pushed their limit, like took every computer related class I could. Some of the art classes that I took, instead of doing it in physical media, I actually also did some of the work digitally. And I felt like at the time, like I graduated high school in '92, which is a generation ago, feels like. They didn't have a lot of, like, their art program was a few classes on the computer. Like they had Photoshop and Illustrator, but I feel like I helped push things. Like I volunteered in the lab and I helped them when they upgraded some of their computers and stuff like that. So I love the design and, like, you know, the idea of art to make people think or to help people understand what I feel or something like that. So I didn't get to be an animator. I'm not telling any of my stories. Where did I go? So I actually paid for a lot of my college by doing hardware, like setting up printers and building computers, and you have to be on site. And when the printer goes down and it's in the middle of the night and the bakery is getting their print ready for the next day, that was not fun. So I wanted to get more into the digital world. So I taught myself HTML, and I love just like pure, like from the standards HTML. My first job was the HTML guy, and usually, so the designers would be on, not like sitting on my shoulder, like the angel and the little, no, not like that. But I would be working with the designer, and they would give me the Photoshop or remember slices. And I would turn it into like good, clean HTML, and then work with the development team, and they would actually like hook it up to the database and turn it into JSP and stuff like that. And I felt like I just love the user, like making it as broadly compatible as we can. So that no matter what browser they're using, it should work for them. And actually, one time we did get a letter so I was working at Definity Health, who wrote us a letter that said, I use Linux, and it's very rare that a website works perfectly in my browser. You have somebody there that really cares about HTML. And so I like printed that, or somebody printed it for me and hung it on my thing. Yeah, so I first started thinking about accessibility, you know, in that time, like when Adobe was buying Macromedia, and there was the Section 508 plugin in Dreamweaver. And it seems like it looked at headings and it said, make sure there's alt text on all of your images. And that was kind of the limits of that plugin. And I love user experience stuff. So I've always been like, all the developers I know would say, yeah, that guy, he's a designer. And all the designers I know would be like, yeah, that guy, he's a developer, but I've never really both, just sometimes a mediator. And it was the perfect, the perfect place to be to get started with accessibility. I think it was, man, what year was it? So I started, I've been with United Health Group for 20 years. I guess, which seems like, ooh, that's a long time, 22 years this November. But moved over to Optum, I think in 2007, joined the user experience part of Optum in 2013. And when they started building the accessibility program, I was just so lucky. What a great opportunity to be next door to that. Like I was doing UX stuff and helping build templates and whatever. And when they started building their accessibility program, just to be right next door to that and be able to like work with them, talk about browser compatibility. Good browser compatibility also kind of sort of means good screen reader compatibility. So it wasn't too much of a jump to really start thinking about more of the accessibility stuff. And I can't say what year it was exactly where I actually like officially joined the accessibility team. It would be probably 2014-ish or 2015 or something like that. And I don't know, I love it because, I mean, I've always loved usability. And actually I used to be, oh, dang, sorry, hit the microphone, sorry about that. I used to be a member of the UXPA Minnesota back when it was just UPA MN. And in one of the meetings one time, I said, I love heuristic evaluations because it's a quick way to do, like to find out, to explore and understand issues without necessarily having to like bring in users and set up the tests and stuff like that. And I kind of got some looks because, you know, it's a big part of the user experience is user testing. So I didn't mean to say like no more user testing ever. But what we do in accessibility is kind of like that. Like we have WCAG and the WCAG success criteria. And in a way, there's a lot of them. So it's not like it's as simple as doing a heuristic evaluation, but kind of like the user should be able to see focus as they tab through. If I'm a keyboard only user and I hit tab, each interactive element should receive focus and I should be able to see it. If they can't, then I know it's going to fail for a real world user. So in a sense, like what we're doing is actually like user experience mediating. I don't know what the right word is. I can't find the right word, but it's kind of like a heuristic evaluation, except that we're really focusing in on issues that specifically can fail for people with disability, users. Some people say I use the word users too much, but people with disabilities, people that might be using a display setting or hardware that's not our 90% of users or our 85% of users, and making it work for those people that use their systems a little bit differently. What else was I going to say? The one thing, like, so I'm getting older, I'm a little bit low vision, and I use big text on my phone. I can't, yeah, it's blurring it. But anyways, I bump up my text everywhere I go. So sometimes things are designed to be pixel perfect. They look awesome at 1024 by 768 or bigger. But if I have a bigger monitor, but still I have stuff that when I bump up my text size to about 150% of normal, I have like buttons where you can't see the end of the text, weird stuff that disappears. So one time, one of my kids' friends was over and they picked up my phone and they looked at it and they were like, oh, yuck. The text is so big. It's like an old person owns this phone. I'm like, yeah, well, you wait. Everybody, if you live long enough, everybody hopefully will get to the point where we start to experience like we don't have perfect vision anymore and stuff like that.
Wow, feel the love, right?
I know. To be like the typical old person, I was like, says the person who goes out of the house in their pajamas. But I didn't say it out loud. Yeah, so I see accessibility everywhere. I mean, because it has an influence on my life for sure. But also because the stuff that we're doing, like to make things a little bit better, and specifically for those success criteria, those things that are in the web content accessibility guidelines. But also like, it just benefits everybody. It's a wholesome kind of job. So like, no matter where we're working, I feel like I'm making a difference for people in a way that matters. In the healthcare industry, you know,
Right?
people are trying to figure out if their claim is going to be paid. People are going to trying to figure out if they have enough money in their HSA for the next thing. And it should just work regardless of how they access their stuff. And I don't know. And that's what I love about the work I get to do with Optum. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Like that was a lot of words. I don't know how long I'm supposed to go for, but
Okay, awesome, Thomas. Lori, what's your story?
Oh, actually, can we do Tammy next?
Yeah.
Cool.
Jump in. And I promise I'll be brief. I'm going to start a little bit further along in the pathway than Thomas, though. For college and where I started my career was primarily in computer science and anthropology, because that seems like a rational combination everybody should choose. But I did a lot of front-end development, quite a bit. And a big portion of what I still love is tech, just in general, new things coming with that. And I'll kind of weave that into how my story makes it personal as well. And I did front-end development for quite a long time, the majority of my career. And then I started weaving in UX and finding out how that was just such a good mix for my personal interests. You know, everybody kind of has their thing. But after a while, I also started missing dev because I was doing all UX work and I liked the combination to a degree and was realizing that. And then came along Lori. So I started on a UX project where I was working with some accessibility engineers. And at that time, I did work with Lori quite a bit. And the process of working with an accessibility engineer was so amazingly fun for me to get to learn all of this new way of perceiving what a website is and what it does and what you should make with it, because it just opened up for me a lot of interest in both the things that come out of it from development, as well as design and even tech, and the new gadgets with where everything goes. And so with Lori's encouragement, I went into the Grow Your Own program in the company. And there's different programs like this across many companies. But basically, what I kind of narrow it down to is a year-long apprenticeship program. And you're working with many different people in different roles and different, every little piece that you're doing is working around WCAG, how that fits in, how to work with people, how to use your skills. And you also get a good feel for where your passion is, what you really enjoy doing, and that whole process. And some of the personal connection to me for accessibility was that while I do have quite a few invisible disabilities that I don't typically disclose in a lot of cases, I have a lot of family members with disabilities too. And the one that kind of always stands out to me as far as it kind of pings on my radar fairly frequently is my great uncle. And when he was mid-30s, he was in an accident. And I apologize, I'm getting over a cold myself, so I'm coughing a little. And he was in an accident that he got paralyzed. And with him, it was where he could only communicate with his family by blinking. And I remember very much visiting him a lot and just not really knowing how to communicate and not understanding it at a young age. And so as I got older and as I've worked through technology and how technology can open up an entire different world for people, it makes me think of that, of how where we are with technology now could have changed so much for him over the years. And even right now, my thing that I love doing probably the most, I again work with this with Lori, is mobile and doing stuff with how mobile devices change things. And as Thomas said, using it with larger text, using it in all these different accessible ways that you didn't even necessarily think about doing. And that brings in that combination of UX and development and innovation and all of those pieces. And that really makes me excited and passionate about the whole realm of accessibility and UX.
So cool. And okay, so my turn. What's really neat is that while I may have, Tammy blames me for pulling her into accessibility, I blame Thomas. And so it's the cool thing is it's like this ripple effect. So I don't know if anybody who's listening, come and join us in the world of accessibility. It's really cool here. Yeah, it is awesome. But and thank you so much, Thomas. It's been the best job I've ever had. And so my quick origin story is that I was working on, I was the design lead for our design system, and I was working with Thomas. Thomas kept telling me, you should come over here. It's really cool. And I said, yeah, I don't know. It sounds really boring in the nicest possible way. It just seemed so cut and dried. And because there was testing and such. And I'm like, I don't know. I really love the crazy world of UX. I really like the amazing stuff that comes out of that. So eventually, due to, burnout or whatever, I finally decided, yes, I will do this. And then I thought to myself, I'll go back to UX after like a year. I'll just I'll become that amazing, Pegasus unicorn thing and just enhance my UX spidey sense and everything. Well, once I got over here, I loved it. And the cool thing is I haven't given up UX. It's just become a bigger world. And now it's like anybody I can talk to, including you guys. So I'm so sorry. I'm going to talk your ear off. But okay, so now my story. So I'm working on my very first accessibility project, and I just switched over, and so I'm all new and fresh and thinking like I'm going to absorb all of this stuff and learn everything, and it's going to be easy in a year. Well, again, things change, but so they're working on they're figuring out their budget, this project, and the decision maker on the project asks, why do we need to make this website accessible for one blind guy? So I went back to my seat after this meeting, very sobered, trying to figure out how to answer that question. And I still think about it, obviously, that was years ago. So first, let me add that when I went back to my desk, I was sitting next to two blind guys, my coworkers and my buddies. And darn right, they should be able to use the site. And then the Scrum Master was red-green colorblind and also dyslexic, but they hadn't told anyone else because they were embarrassed. And I was thinking, they should be able to use this site. And later I was discussing motion on the homepage with some of the designers on the project. And I found out that a little more than half of them have ADHD. And so they were irritated by some of the constant motion because yeah, there was a carousel, right? And it didn't have a pause button, but but they were irritated by that motion and distracted, but they had never thought to call it out before. And I'm thinking they should be able to use the site. And although I didn't know it at the time, chronic pain was going to make the mouse very painful to me. And so now I am almost exclusively a keyboard only user. I should be able to use the site. But what's interesting is that I didn't say any of that to the decision makers. What I did say was, well, one of the benefits of considering accessibility is that you get better at search engine optimization. And they replied, oh, well, why didn't you tell us that in the first place? And we got the budget. That was the thing that got the budget, is that it had something to do with the ROI. So, and the dollar sense, right? So, but that's honestly, that's why I'm here, because this question comes up over and over again. And, accessibility is about more than one mythical blind guy. It's your coworker, it's your friend, it's, family member, and it's me. So, yeah, I think that's what was really important to bring today, was we need to be able to ask those questions, and there are really, really good answers. So
super interesting. That
Yeah.
actually makes me think, from a user experience perspective, like when we're doing user testing or if we're looking through the clickstream logs to find out, how many of our users are using what size of a monitor. And based on that, we're going to design for 1024 and up, because we know 90% of our users are using these awesome monitors or using this display size. So from a user experience perspective, from a design perspective, there's lots of times where we say, we're gonna try and solve for 85% of our users. The thing that's interesting about accessibility, and I should use a better word than interesting, but the thing that makes me want to explore it even more, like the more I learn, the more I want to know about it, is that that 15% that we left out might be the people that most need design that works for them. So it requires switching from a UX, like we're going to serve the majority, to we're going to make it work for everybody, like flipping that over, is part of the tricky, like one of the first hurdles, I think, for some designers. But once you get past that, there's so many connections between, like we want to make stuff work on a smaller screen. So yeah, sure, we used to design for 1024 and up. Now we're designing for small screens all the ding dong day because we want it to be mobile. We want it to be responsive. And so if we're doing it for responsive reasons, the other benefit to that is that it works for accessibility as well. I bump up my text size and it still fits on my screen, or vice versa. We do it for accessibility and then it also works for responsive. So that kind of shift in thinking is, I think, one of the first best breakthroughs for a designer, change of mindset kind of thing.
I agree. I think it was a shift. It's important to have a shift, like who is this affecting, right? And so oh yes, let's see if I can share my screen. I'm gonna, and I'll put the link in here in a moment after I see if I can share. Let's see, I only want to share my browser. So we're gonna do that. All right. So this is the CDC, Center for Disease Control. And here's this graphic: disability impacts all of us. And the statistics here is that 26% of adults in the United States have some type of disability. So, the thing is, if we're only designing for people with disabilities, only designing for this, that's 25% of our population. And I know that there's a lot of talk in UX about, hey, we design for the 85%. So, all right, are you going to ignore though 25% though? That's a huge population. And but then if we think about like who else is affected by it, I have invisible disabilities. I have things like aphasia, so I forget words. So if you hear me pause, there's a really good reason for that today. I was joking with these two earlier that I forgot the word agile as I was talking to the Scrum Master, and poor guy had a heart attack. I think he was I'm sorry, I shouldn't say heart attack, but anyway, so he was very upset. But
that's all right. The word agile might be overused these days.
Right. But so there's different types of things we're addressing here. So if we're talking about people with a permanent disability, we're talking about people with situational and temporary disabilities. So for example, I break my leg, right? So now I've got a temporary disability. Or if I'm, holding my groceries and trying to see, like, is there anything else on my grocery list, then I've got a situational impairment, right? So that I can only use one hand at that particular moment. So what's kind of cool is that we start to think about this, right? Is, like designing for mobile. You were, mentioning this earlier, but and what I mean specifically by that is like, your responsive design. So how is this going to work on a small format? So if you think mobile first, right, then you're already starting to think about the changes between what's this going to look like in your different formats. You already have that sort of mindset. It's like, okay, well, the cool thing is once you design for a really small, format, that actually helps somebody who is on a desktop and may zoom in 200%. Because like you, Thomas, I have, I zoom in on things. I love that. And so, and it makes me so frustrated when something gets cut off, because I swear it's like they save the best words for last. It's like, no, I want to know what this app does for me. So I think that's what's exciting, is that we're already doing some of this stuff as designers. It's just kind of like a different mindset, which you alluded to earlier, Tammy, is that different mindset.
Yeah. And it's really an interesting thing to make sure that not only are you starting to have those conversations about accessibility or responsive design and some of that at the very beginning, but even further to the beginning, before anything even goes on a piece of paper or mock-ups or anything, start having those conversations. We have, Lori and I had worked on a project where we started out very much before any of that with the designers and having these conversations, and they started coming to us with, does this work? Does this work? What should we do here? And after a little while, they were getting those questions before we could even respond from an accessibility perspective. And it allowed for so much more focus on the little things that you really want to get in there, the nice to haves, and it made it a much smoother transition. And as we were talking about before with budgets, because sadly, a lot of it is around budgeting, it eliminates a lot of that rework. It eliminates a lot of that expense at the later end if you don't have those conversations, if you hold off on accessibility. Or even if your designs, many of you might know, if you hold off on doing responsive and try to go backwards, it's not a happy path. So.
Oh, that brings up a really excellent point, is doing things early. So go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah. No, that's what I was going to get into, but you go ahead first.
Right? It's like, so it's kind of like the earlier you can find things in the design process, then you prevent that from ever happening, right? But if you find it later on, then, oh my gosh, it gets really, really expensive. I got to fix something in production. No fun. And I think that I've also been, like accessibility. Sometimes I've had designers talk to me and like, wait, so you want to limit the motion that we can put on this website? Oh man, you're going to take all this fun stuff away. We had all these cool reinforcements, behavior reinforcement stuff that we were doing on here. And now we can't even do it. No, you can still do that. There's just, it's just neat to know where your boundaries are. So, you don't have like video all over the place, and how can we make that better? And if you think about it too, when you're planning for that, then it ends up helping other people too. Like we were talking about ADHD earlier, right? So if I have less motion on the site, not only does that help me, if I have difficulties processing motion and vision, and but also it helps me if, like, again, I've got attention issues, whether that's ADHD or it's just, situational. Like today, I have little, real difficulty paying attention. So Thomas, what were you going to say?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Thomas. You had one.
Well, you covered most of what I was thinking there. So I was going to say, like, there's a couple of articles out there about the exponentially cheaper the earlier you can find an issue thing. And I'd actually love to do a cool graph. Like it's 1,000 times cheaper. So like if we do every step in the software development lifecycle, like business, design, I'm going to skip some steps, but business, design, dev, QA, and UAT. And it's add another zero if we find something on production, every step to the left you have to go to if we could have fixed that issue there, it's that many times cheaper. I don't know what the actual math is, but certainly a lot. I would much rather have fixed an issue that we found in dev when it was still in dev, as opposed to somebody calling us, putting in a ticket with help desk and saying, hey, you guys need to fix this. And now we need to do a production release to fix it. So it doesn't matter what the defect is, that's generally true. And when it comes to user experience and accessibility stuff, the sooner, the better, the cheaper.
I think you have better innovation on that too as you're working through that process. We had some conversations early in the day actually about as you're working through designs. And if you are the designer and you're reading them out into the session as you're working through that, you're making it more accessible. And you're also working it through in your mind. And sometimes you find gaps that way. So if you are saying that something has this and this is a heading and this is a link and this is the next one, then you're kind of like, oh, wait, this is actually what I meant. This is really the order that I want it to be read in, and it's reversed. That was a very big step for me initially when I was learning accessibility, just because it really connected those pieces of the steps and where that goes. And as we all know from a design perspective, your first iteration is not usually your best. There's going to be feedback. There's going to be rethinking it. There's usability testing. There's all of those pieces. So the more information that you can get from that feedback, the better. And the better product you have, the more innovative product you have. So I think that can be very important in the whole process, is that iteration, that step, and early.
We have a question from Sarah. And what's neat is that, we're talking about doing things as early as possible. And so Sarah asked a question about research. And I know, right? So like you anticipated us. We were so excited. All right. So the question is this: given that accessibility needs are often very private, unspoken, and unknown, and thank you for recognizing that, by the way, awesome, gold star, how do you suggest approaching UX studies, specifically soliciting feedback from a user with an accessibility need? What types of questions do you have in your repertoire to solicit helpful/usable feedback?
That's a great question. And actually, it's getting more and more. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in first. This is exciting to me. One of my favorite side interests or should be working closer with accessibility is user testing. I can't remember when it was. I think CSUN 2018. I think Target did a presentation about more inclusive user testing. And that, I think the presentation is out there, or at least we can find the slide deck for it. I've seen somebody showed it to me once recently. And they've got some pretty good questions I think they share in theirs. I think one of the places to start is that it's volunteer, that we ask people to share if they want to share. Not like scraping some data and finding that we have a bunch of users on our site that never use the mouse. They only move from elements using the tab key. They must have some kind of disability. That would be kind of like a sneaky, creepy way to approach users and say, hey, we notice something about your data. That wouldn't be so nice. But if there's a way to just openly say, we want to make our product better. We're looking for insights from people with all abilities. So regardless and especially if you interact differently, I don't know how to say it in a way that is all inclusive of all varying abilities, of all disabilities. It's too easy. The first thing that comes to mind is to think, oh, accessibility, blind people, screen readers. And sorry to say it crass like that, but that's sometimes what we hear, that's the first thing that jumps to mind is oh, we got to make it work with screen reader. But depending one way or another, there's, I don't know, 4 or no. So I think there's 6 kind of areas of disability, and I'll probably need both of you guys' help to get through it. But so vision, hearing related, motor skill, if I have tremors or that kind of stuff. Hearing. What are some other ones? Did we do hearing?
Oh, cognition.
I writing them down. Neurodiversity, and those can be ADHD or anxiety. And then what's one more that I like to throw in there and speech. So some of those things might be interrelated. Some of those things might be one or the other. They kind of tie in. if somebody has one issue or another, so if I'm, oh my gosh, I'm losing my words right now. An inability to move, it may also include not having good speech. So how do we approach that? But I don't know, how do we find users elsewhere? Like we post it out there. And there are some groups too, some businesses. There's I think one, I should know the name of it, in Minnesota that actually does a really good job of pretty diverse recruiting.
So I have some language, some sample language,
Yeah.
if you like, that I
Oh,
can
yeah.
read. Okay, here's some guidelines as Thomas is going over. So I'm just going to repeat some stuff. Ask early, don't assume, but do assume the person is an expert about their own accommodations. And if there's going to be inform the participant if the study may entail recalling triggering stories. So here's the sample language that I mentioned. Please let me know if you might require any accommodations during the meeting, such as specialized technology, a break for concentration, a sign language interpreter, etc. I will do what I can to ensure an accessible experience. And so the nice thing is you're not asking for them to disclose what they, anything they have, like if they have a disability or whatever. You're just asking for their accommodations. What accommodations do they need? And so I think it's kind of cool that you're focusing on what they need rather than what they're dealing with. There's other cool considerations. Oh yeah, Tammy, please go.
Well, I was going to just comment too. I think one thing that you had mentioned, Lori, in some of the testing, or maybe it's Thomas, I'm uncertain, is some incidents too where like the battery dying on your mouse and stuff like that. Maybe consider some of those as just examples in your usability tests as is. Can a person get through the process without a mouse, without hovering, without doing some things that they normally do? Is your design solid enough that it can stand that test through the whole process?
Wow, I love that. That would be so fun. Like a little bit mean maybe to say, before you start this test, we want to let you know that the mouse doesn't work. We're going to ask you to complete this test with a keyboard alone. Or to say, like, during this test, we want you to pretend that you've injured your hand. And because your hand is in a sling for this test, you either have to mouse left-handed or just use the keyboard. And to see the impacts, because that happens to people in real life. Like it was my wife's mouse quit and she had to finish the form with keyboard alone. And she was like, it was like a miracle. Like, luckily it worked with keyboard alone. I was like, well, they're starting to pay attention to accessibility, or they're at least not wrecking it, because the other side of it, the other perspective is that plain old HTML is pretty dang accessible. It's when we do a bunch of magic CSS and weird stuff that we're hiding the focus indicator, or we're changing contrast to be super, super, super premium vision light, or whatever. So plain old HTML should work. Anyway, sorry, I got sidetracked.
No, this is perfect. So, so two things. So first, I also want to make sure that if you don't have a screen reader, if you can't supply a screen reader, if you don't have the tech, right, don't let that be a barrier for you. Try and if you're really early on, hey, if you've got a sketch, you've got something on a napkin that you drew, right, then talk it through with someone if they're, for example, if they're blind, right? And so like, hey, can I just walk through this design with you? And, you can tell me what you think. And especially you want to have somebody who's experienced with that if you can, but there are many, many ways that you can make this happen that doesn't have to, be a blocker for you to get that information as early as possible. We're talking about, and this leads into the future of accessibility. So I was having a great discussion with like 4 different blind people, blind coworkers, I should say. And so we were talking about alternative text for images. And so I was like wanting to like, what do you consider is useful, right? When is it decorative? Like, you know, emotional images, are those important? So each person had their own response. And I thought that was super cool. And so one of them wanted, you know, yeah, just, you know, ignore almost all images because I can't see them anyway. So I don't care. I don't want to know about it. And that person has a developer background. So they're very cut and dried, which I love. And then another one like, yeah, these emotional images are really important to me and make a huge difference. And then, by the way, Roberto, this is a call out to you because you were in that conversation. And then we had somebody else who, you know, wanted every single possible image described because they wanted the equivalent experience of a sighted user, was how they put it. So, so I think it was actually Roberto that had the really great idea to talk like WCAG, you know, not WCAG, I'm sorry, but HTML, maybe in the future, we can actually categorize images so that we know this one is totally meaningful. This one is essential, you know, we put some text, we embedded some text in the image, which we shouldn't do, but, you know, so qualify that should be always read. This one is more emotional and that way, and then the other one is, you know, really it's decorative stuff, you know, like a divider bar or something like that. So if we can have that kind of classification on our images, then individuals can cater the experience to the way that they want, right? Just like I can scan a page and I'm like, oh, I know that that's an ad, right, for something. I don't really care about that. But, you know, or it's just like, it's this fluff image. I don't care about that. So everybody can have an equivalent experience and say, don't even bother with emotional images. So I think that's kind of interesting, like looking forward, how can we, you know, enhance our experiences so that they're, you know, easier for everybody and we can, yeah, move into an interesting place. And Thomas, do you want to talk about what your favorite thing is? Your advice to people?
Which, like, wait, what? I have a couple of favorite things specific to.
It's the designing for more than, yeah. I'm sorry, it's designing for more than visibility, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, no, that's all right. You're right on though. This is so. Somebody asked one time, like, what could change in design? Like, what's the first thing that could change in the design world that could make the best impact, the biggest positive change for accessibility? And I've been thinking about it. I wasn't able to answer the question on the spot, but later after thinking about it for a while, I thought, like, our design should be less visual. Like, because we're designing for people who are screen reader users, true, but also as we continue to move into the future, there's no guarantee that everybody is going to be looking at our page anyways. They might have Alexa parsing and reading the page to us, and they don't even care to look at the page. Or they might be accessing our form through just truly voice interaction, where they're filling out the same form just in another way. As technology continues to get better, how humans interact with our stuff is less and less the user sitting in front of a computer screen. And it's going to get more and more like into the other senses anyways. So for designers, where it used to be like, there used to not be a lot of difference between somebody who like, oh, I do graphic design or I do UX design. I think now pretty much all design, I mean, there's still graphic design out there for print and whatever, but I think the world is like user experience. Not even, we don't like, visual is just a part of that. That's a small part of that. We have to start to learn to pay more and more attention to all of the other ways humans are going to be interacting with our digital properties. Yeah. So thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, no, sorry. And there's a specialty of like voice designers too, right? And so more and more of that's going to happen. I get very excited thinking about those kinds of things.
I think it's going to become even more and more important to have multiple ways of interacting and making sure you're designing for that. And mobile right now is a good example of that, where you might be processing through a native design that people are using just your standard swipe, or they're using voice control, or they're using a screen reader. So you need to be able to think about all those possible pathways as you're designing through them, and what is your expectation of that flow? What information is the most important? What is the context that it's providing as it goes through there? And how are people going to access it? Again, keyboard, we've done some testing on keyboard on mobile, and well, there's not that many people who are probably using keyboard on mobile. There are some, and there's Braille keyboards that we don't always bring into that equation of designing for that too, and how people use them. So flexibility is a big thing on that.
Yeah. Shoot, man, I just had a thought. Now I can't think of it. So earlier when Lori was talking before, I was thinking about one of the approaches to design that meshes well with accessibility is, because I was talking about like browser compatibility and stuff, is just device agnostic. Like regardless of what the device is that somebody uses, it should work with it. And I think of like hover is dead. There are probably more. I think the first time it happened actually was in 2013. I remember reading an article that said there was more web traffic that came from mobile than came from desktop. And that to me was like, I can't remember if that's exactly, if that was visitors or if that was actual clicks or whatever. But now it's for sure. Like there are more people not using a mouse than are. Why are we still hung up on exposing? I still see sites everywhere, even new stuff, where some information, the only way to get to it is through hover. That's like super weird to me, because regardless of the device I'm using, we should be able to have all of this information being available. So, I mean, that's partly an accessibility thing, but that's partly just like be device agnostic. And then to take it a step further would be to say like, be interaction agnostic. We don't know if users are going to use a keyboard. We don't know if they're going to use speech recognition. We don't know if they're going to be working through a form with a digital assistant, and they could say to the form, only show me the required fields on this form, and it would update the page and hide all of the optional fields. If everything is programmatically properly coded, theoretically that's possible. And we will get there. Eventually, like Scotty came back in time in that third Star Trek movie. And in Star Trek, everybody's only talking to the computer. And it's rare that you ever have to use the keyboard. So we're heading that way. I'm sure of it.
Lori, I had one that I was wondering if you could talk about too, where remembering the age and how you want to do the age of your usability studies.
The age, you mean like the age range?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, it's funny. I was just talking about this with someone. And so they, by the way, I see some answers, some questions in the chat, but get to those in a minute. So I was talking with somebody, and they said that they left it open with their recruiting agency anywhere between 20 and 90. And what was interesting is that so they're like, we allowed for that, right? So 90-year-olds can totally participate in this, but the only people, I think, below the age of 30 actually responded. And so that's the only actual results that they got, even though they tried to have older participants involved. I think that, so I'm trying to think of the answer that you want me to say, Tammy. But I think that, one of the challenges you want to try and, there was guerrilla research that you can do within your organization, but okay, I can't remember what you want me to say.
No, it was, you had a note on that. Oh, go ahead, Thomas.
I did. Okay.
Oh, no, but you're getting into it. Like, so like we send out a survey request, or a participant request, and it's mostly young people that are like hanging out on the places where they're going to be participating in user testing. So we might have to think differently, like, sorry, that's the Apple thing, but to like recruit differently, to find, especially in things that have more emotional cost to fail. That was one thing we were talking about before, or the other day, that in healthcare, if a user can't complete a task, then that's painful and hurtful and emotional and frustrating, and it makes somebody angry. If we've ever sat in a user test where the person says, I don't know, I feel dumb because I'm sure it's right here and I just can't find it. Like anytime the user feels like they failed in the lab, like then for sure it's happening out in the real world. And if somebody feels dumb when they're trying to find, like, I thought this was covered and now I got a bill for $800. What in the world is happening? Or I just met with my doctor and they said, we need to set up an appointment with the specialist on Monday. How do I get this approval? Well, if it's not easy to do, or if the website doesn't allow for me to make it through that process in a painless and easy way, because this is already a painful experience, the frustration is like magnified by that frustration and anger. So, finding our users, I know it's not just 20 and 30-year-olds who are using healthcare sites. Probably those are the less likely users. So, we have to know our audience and try and find the users where they are. I guess I don't know the best way to do it, but it's something we have to solve for.
And in fact, there were a couple questions in Q&A about recruitment, specifically of people with disabilities. And I think you touched on some of that, right? It's like, hey, there's all sorts of situations that we can sort of, touch on. If I'm not working with some board testing, I think is one thing that's really, that will reveal a lot about the availability of your calls to action and on your page, right? So that's kind of a cheat that you can do to kind of check in if recruitment is difficult. And I believe Measuring You is a good resource that I've heard that has includes people with disabilities and has a pool of individuals. So I would check them out. And then let's see. Also, I would say I would look for accommodations rather than disabilities, right? It's like, hey, who needs this kind of thing, right? Do you regularly have subtitles? There are those kinds of ways to ask that question. And I want to put in, I'm going to have a resources list of links. And so I have a couple of those and I will share those somehow, one way or another, so that you can do some more reading. Anybody else want to add something? There's another question here too.
I think whether you're talking about usability studies or even WCAG itself and the requirements, neurodiversity is underwhelming in the representation there, shall we say. So that's something to just be aware of. And I don't know that there's a perfect solution for that, but definitely be aware of it. And whether you're talking ADHD, autism, dyslexia even, or any of the other cognitive disabilities, it's not brought in a way that probably should represent the percentage that it actually affects.
It's such an interesting point, because I've heard due to the challenges in data, various information about how many individuals are in that neurodiverse category, right? I've heard sometimes, when you're talking about what's the most amount of, the disability that is most frequent. Okay, words are apparently escaping me today, but the highest of incidence of disabilities. But anyway, some I've heard say that it's people, that are neurodiverse, and sometimes it's mobility. So, but to me, it seems like that's such a sweet spot with user experience anyway. Cognitive overload, right? If we design for that, we know that, or somebody, when you're onboarding somebody, if you think about those kinds of scenarios, then there's a lot of overlap there. Although, then there's dyscalculia, dyslexia, and all those kinds of things, which have some other interesting needs, but really, you're trying not to overwhelm somebody. And there's lots of cool ways that if you're thinking about that already, you're already helping to address some of those neurodiverse populations. But definitely something that's important to look into. Yeah, I love that you. Thank you for calling that out, Tammy.
So you just reminded me that earlier when you were talking about carousels and other moving things and stuff like that, and especially with people that are distracted, like I don't have any diagnosis for attention disorder of any kind or whatever, but there have been times where I'm watching a video where they have it's just text and then some dancing animation thing next to it, and I totally missed what was on what the text they put on the page there, because that animation just kept moving, and is it trying to get my attention? And then it changed to the next slide and I didn't get the words. I was like, what the heck happened? Is it the video or is it me? I think, under reporting, I think more of us are distracted than we even know. And actually earlier we were talking about, and that reminded me of earlier we were talking about taking away the magic. There's sometimes a perspective of, oh, well, if you have to make your site accessible, then Thomas is going to tell you can't do any cool stuff. Actually, 2 times in particular that I can remember in my career where somebody said, no, this carousel has to auto rotate. Otherwise, how are people ever going to see the 4th and 5th panel? I was like, most people just skip over carousels anyways, isn't it? I thought carousels were a promise that failed, I don't know, back in 2000.
Don't they have the lowest incidence, especially if it's not the first, slide that you might as well not even bother because nobody's going to see them. But
yeah, I don't have any official data, but I think the first slide is has some, I can't remember who was telling me about it. I think they actually did how long a slide is within the viewport. So not even guaranteeing that the user is looking at this, but they were trying to collect some clickstream data on their carousels, that the first slide had a tendency to be on screen for a surprisingly short amount of time, an average of 6 seconds or something like that. The second slide was a 1/10 of a second, was hardly ever seen, ever. Carousels are just dangerous. So, do I hate magic? Are carousels magic? I don't think so. Maybe we should, I don't know. We should be very careful with carousels. I just recently actually saw something. I was like, oh yeah, that's what I came to this site for. And as I clicked, it changed. And I ended up clicking on the second slide. I don't even know what the second slide was, but it took me to some other page. Carousels, I don't know who loves them, but they keep showing up out there. Sorry if this is a sensitive topic, but one other time where
anti-carousel program. Yeah.
One other, there was a message dialogue that after you saved this thing, it said, record number blah 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 has been added to blah blah blah, and then it was up there for 5 seconds and it went away. I was like, whoa, wait. For accessibility reasons, first of all, if it has information in there that someone might like to copy and paste, or if I looked away for a second, I might have missed your magic disappearing notification. It's not magic anymore. If some people who wanted that information missed it, so that you got to find that balance. What we landed on was setting the focus on that container, and then it stayed for as long as the user had focus on it. And if they tabbed off of it, then the timer started and it went away. So we found, some balance there as far as I'm not anti-magic.
Right. It's kind of neat because these kind of constraints really lead to some innovation, and everybody loves, that shiny word, innovation. But and of course I just had this example in my head. I was like, I'm going to talk about this. Oh no, it was motion on this mobile app. And so they wanted to, convey, hey, you achieved this goal. Awesome. And so they wanted to have an animation that came in and, some confetti would appear. And so we're like, yeah, you can do that, as long as the confetti doesn't, go too long, right? And as long as you can be processed if you have difficulty processing color, But so we said, okay, well, what about we, add like a haptic, response as well. So, your phone would, buzz a little bit. And so like, oh my gosh, that's super cool. We don't want to do with everything, but just those moments of delight where like, hey, you accomplished a goal. You're awesome. And so it's really cool. And speaking of innovation, I just get so excited when I think of like Siri. Siri wouldn't be here if, we weren't designing for people with disabilities. And it's mind-boggling to think of that, but I'm sure you've talked to Siri sometimes, and there's a good conversation and then there's the bad conversation, challenges and accents and all that kind of stuff. It's so amazing what has led to these monumental changes. So somebody, I love this point. Accessible design can make an experience more magical. I agree 100%. I've seen nothing but cool stuff when we start to talk about accessibility on a project. Speaking of which, Roberto asked a fabulous question, which is, have you had the opportunity to hear from users that have been impacted directly by the work you do? Any interesting story? So Thomas, Tammy, do you have any stories that you've come across?
I think one potentially interesting, I don't actually have like it coming back from the user necessarily. Some sites love to have like the big video in the background. So it's a hero image, but not only is it a hero image, but it's animated. Outside of work, somebody was talking about that their only means of accessing the internet is through mobile. So they're pretty careful about how much data they use. And so when they come to sites that have like big video, fancy stuff, that's eating in, that actually costs them real money because it's getting closer to their bandwidth limit, and they have to pay to upgrade. On my plan, if I hit my limit, they'll throttle me. And so I'll be down at 128K if I hit my max, whatever that is. We haven't hit it yet. But I mean, that's like 2004 dual modems. That's the best you could do. That's like super sad that those people will not experience awesome video anymore at that point if they're working from their, even if they have unlimited data and they're working from 128K at that point.
Speaking of data, I had to stop my video because I'm getting these warnings. But right, so it's appropriate. But I think the biggest call out is, so we had back when I was working at Optum, and it's something called an accessibility summit. So it was this big, conference, and we had a guest join us who had lost his sight in an accident, and he was like a racing pit crew lead or something like that. And so he shares his story and how it's super cool that, actually he got back to being a pit crew lead, and, was his car was in a race and things happened and it was awesome. But so of course I don't remember that part, but what I remember is I'm sitting there with tears streaming down my face because he was describing what a difference assistive technology made in his life, right? That, this is awesome. Like I can read, I can, still keep up on the news. I can still, operate my tools. I can, all of this. He says, the things you do every day make a world of difference to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And even, design as a UX designer for healthcare, it was awesome, but this is next level stuff, right? It's like, oh my gosh, we can make the difference to somebody, like just, living a life where, they're their best awesome selves. So it, it helps me personally. So I have my own little bitty stories, but that was the most meaningful one that I can remember.
I think one that I have is somewhat of a call out to on things to consider, in that most of the stories that I recall are areas where gaps have been identified or that I've found, and I'm like, we need to do better. And a lot of times it's internal to the company, because we design these websites and these apps for external, and we're a little bit more careful about the designs and how they're developed, but we kind of forget that we need that internally also. And so, it's something where it's just as important. And it's really unfortunate in some of those areas, especially when it comes to situations where personal data comes up and you can't access it and you have to ask for somebody to help you access it. And that's a very uncomfortable situation for everybody and very frustrating situation. So it's really important to check those. And whether you're talking healthcare or even, like I said, any personal information that you're working with, there's times when you are very stressed out. And as we all know, in the last few years, anxiety has increased among the general population massively. And so those are situations where you need to make sure that you're not creating dark patterns in your designs, and be very thoughtful about what you're putting into them and each of the steps that's part of that. It can make all the difference to somebody.
Oh my gosh. And I wanted to add that, let's say you have, you think I've got a site, no one is going to look at this. It's for internal, employees only. So, we don't have any blind people using this site. We'll be fine. First of all, you don't know, because there was a study that 85% of people who request an accommodation don't disclose. So that's huge. You have no idea really the numbers that are in your organization. So be mindful of that. And then the second thing I would say is that even if you think it won't touch anyone, we all know somebody. We all know somebody that if it makes a difference as you're choosing products, as you're choosing who to work with. Kaya Reed, awesome designer. She started adding alt text to the images she was sent out an email and put in chats. They're just sharing GIFs, in the department chat, and she would add alt text to all of those. I will tell you this, other than the fact that she's awesome, I will choose Kaya over other designers because that was so cool. I chose my dryer. I bought a dryer recently, and I chose it because it had Braille on the display. I don't know Braille, but I know friends who know Braille. And actually it turned out it was really cool that it had an app. So now I can do all this extra stuff, and the app's not bad, like in terms of accessibility. And so all of that makes a difference in who I work with, what I choose to purchase. All of that has an influence. So it should be there. Okay, there's also really awesome questions that I want to make sure we get to. We only have like, I think 9 minutes left.
I was gonna say one just briefly about that
yeah.
question is
Yeah.
that when it works, sometimes we don't hear about it, and that's a good thing. Like if stuff just worked for everybody, then that's how it should be. For high school graduation 2020, my daughter graduated from high school. They sent out a PDF. Everything was just a picture. There was no actual text in the PDF. And on my phone, and it was super light gray, the whole city of where the parade route was going to go, because they did cars, was all in this PDF. And on my phone, I could not zoom in enough. Whatever they did with this PDF, it was not enough. I had to go to my computer to see it. And I felt like so useless, that it was so frustrating, and I wanted to send them a flaming email, but whatever, so that when it fails, it hurts. When it works, like how many times have I just been able to like just get the information I need? It works. I can zoom in, I can copy and paste text out of it. Works like I expect it to. That's just how it should be for everybody.
Okay, and I know we got to get to questions, but I have to add on one more thing to that, which is, so Brene Brown, Dare to Lead podcast, was talking with Charlie and somebody else, I can't remember, it was basically about the toxic work environments and how they led to the Great Resignation. Hopefully that'll be enough for you to find it. But basically, one of the top predictors, most successful predictors of leaving an organization and considering it toxic is if there's a lack of inclusion, if you feel excluded, and that includes, LGBTQ+ and people with disabilities. So this is big stuff, right? It's a huge impact. So anyway, okay. So I wanted to get to questions. Did anybody else have anything before I do that?
I think we should go to questions.
Okay. We will keep going if you don't stop us. All right. So somebody asked, what are some good practices to measure accessibility?
And I think this one is kind of a fun one too. If you think about it, is split between design and development. Oftentimes with development, we talk a lot about, running different automated systems, whether it's Wave or Axe in your browser and some of those. And while you do get some of that in design, where you're checking color contrast and things like that, it's a little bit, as Lori likes to say on some of their stuff, squishy in testing some of those pieces. So Lori, did you have some thoughts you wanted to add to that one from a design perspective? Don't know if we lost Lori.
Sorry. Oh, yeah, I'm still here. I couldn't.
Okay.
My audio is going in and out. So from a design perspective, I think there's some add-ins in your browser. Wave is I think one of the most visually easy to process. So as a designer, I liked how that presented, issues, and how, and I could turn on and off the CSS essentially. So I think that's a really good tool for guiding you through. But be wary that that's only going to come up with a certain amount of automated things, right? There's things it can't detect, and it'll try and warn you. And so I think it's a great place to start, is what I would suggest. And that's Wave, WAVE.
Yeah, and that's more useful once it makes it into once it's sort of developed and you have it in the browser, right? From a design perspective, like at design time, there's not really a lot of accessibility checking things like in, Figma or InDesign or whatever, maybe some color contrast checking, that kind of stuff, right? I don't work a lot with design tools, but I saw one of the other questions out there, and kind of related to this is, getting started with accessibility. Where do we start to learn about it? And I think there's a couple of things, like if you go out to WCAG, to the W3C, and search for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I think we'll have links to that. I see Karen said DQ is developing a tool to check accessibility in Figma.
Nice.
That's super cool. And Figma is an awesome place for that, actually, because a lot of the elements that are created in Figma actually have a lot of other properties associated with them. And I was thinking, like, yeah, actually, we could have, some of those things. It's already in there as data, like the border color, the background color, the text color, what was one of the things? Oh, if there's an image, that kind of stuff, and what would the associated text be? That kind of stuff can be added as properties. Figma is pretty cool, actually, as far as turning a lot of the design into data. So that's a cool opportunity there. So, there's like WCAG is big, and we've been talking a lot about the spirit of WCAG, a lot about like why it's good and the user experience of it. But there's a whole like technical side of like the WCAG success criteria. That's the measuring stick for, if you'll excuse measuring stick, like you must be this tall. But there are like, if you look at WCAG 2.1 AA, I think there's like, somebody could tell me actually, I think there's like 50 or 60 or so success criteria, from like, hey, colors of things that have meaning or purpose, the color contrast should be a certain level so that it's highly perceivable, to we should have good code so it works well in people's browsers, from like beginning to end, and there's a ton of stuff in between. So it's not easy to like just jump in. My middle kid is graduating from high school this year, and he has started the Web Accessibility Foundations course that's available on from the W3C site. I can't remember where it is. Introduction to Accessibility Foundations, I think it's called. And it's a lot. It's like 20 hours worth of stuff. Some little things that people can do. We could talk about the design for. I keep pointing over there, but there's nothing over there. My screen's over there.
Before you do,
yes, sorry, go ahead.
I think we may have only 1 minute left.
Oh, shoot.
Because I just wanted to, I'm not 100% sure if we like get cut off, but so keep going until they cut us off.
We won't cut you off, but yes, let's wrap it up because we could keep talking forever. This is a great topic. We appreciated having you here, but yeah, any final thoughts before we end for the night?
So very briefly, I'll say that yes, WCAG is the law. Like, so if we didn't convince you that the user experience for all people is the reason to do accessibility, there is also like Section 508 and other standards like the ADA and ACA or whatever. I can't remember what all the legal stuff is, but there's that side of it too, like WCAG 2.0 AA. All of those success criteria have to be met, generally speaking. I'm more on the spirit of the law, like the spirit of WCAG instead of the letter of the law. When it comes to WCAG, I love the user experience. We should do it because it's good for users. That's my perspective.
Cool. Tammy, any closing things to say?
I just love all the questions. I'm so passionate about this, as we all are. And so I thank everybody for giving us the opportunity to speak, because it is exciting. And if you get a chance to come into the realm of accessibility, we will welcome you wholeheartedly.
Beautifully said. And it is so, it's been such an exciting journey, and I never get bored. There's such a mix of, of design and technical stuff going on all the time. I mean, yeah, mobile, we didn't even touch on mobile. That's wild, wild west stuff and super fun. That's, yeah, what a fun, exciting journey this has been, and so rewarding. I thank goodness every day that this is what I get to do. And it is every time I talk to somebody, I learn something new. And it's been both a personally and professionally rewarding journey. So yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lori, Tammy, Thomas. Really appreciate you volunteering your time to come and talk to our community. We're getting lots of thanks from chat as well. So I know they really appreciate it. And if you do want to share any links, if there's anything that you can send us over, we will be sending out an email afterwards with the link to this video, so we can send out any resources that you want to share as well.
Perfect. Will do.
All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, for attending tonight. We really appreciate having you here. UXPA Minnesota appreciates you, and we'll meet back again next month around this time for our next month's event. So just watch your email and look at our site for that. But otherwise, just one more time, thank you very much to our excellent speakers. Really enjoyed having you, and have a great evening, everyone. Bye.
Grateful for the opportunity. Thanks for having us.